Welcome to today's deep dive. I'll be your host as we explore fascinating topics today. And as always, I'm joined by our resident financial expert.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get into the weeds on this one.
I am too, because we are looking at something today that affects millions of people, yet almost no one actually understands how the plumbing works behind the scenes.
Right. It's one of those invisible industries.
Exactly. I mean, we all know the agonizing limbo of tax season. You file your return, you realize the government owes you a chunk of your own money, but you are stuck at the mercy of federal processing times.
It is the absolute worst waiting game.
It really is. So today we are looking at a multi-billion-dollar industry built entirely on monetizing that exact waiting period.
Yep.
We're pulling from a highly detailed Wikipedia dive covering the entire life cycle of a financial product known as the Refund Anticipation Loan, or RAL.
A fascinating piece of financial history.
Our mission today is to uncover how a seemingly mundane financial product, born in a local accounting firm, exploded into a national behemoth. We'll look at the controversial mechanics operating beneath its surface and exactly why major banks suddenly decided to abandon it entirely.
It really is a wild ride.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the massive scale of this industry, let's look at the friction that created it.
The core problem for the taxpayer.
Right, you've got this guaranteed money, but it's trapped. Back in the day, that wait wasn't just a few days, it could be months.
Literally months.
So the appeal of a third party sitting across the desk offering to front you that exact amount of money in 24 hours is incredibly strong.
Oh, it is the ultimate pitch for convenience. I mean,
Yeah.
you get your money right away, the wait is eliminated, and you can just get on with your lives.
Exactly.
But when you look at the actual mechanics of these refund anticipation loans, which are essentially short-term consumer loans, usually lasting just 2 to 3 weeks, it reveals an incredibly massive, intricate intersection. Well, you have federal tax policy colliding with retail banking, all driven by a profound understanding of consumer psychology. It's a perfect storm of financial convenience and, as we'll see, deeply hidden costs.
What really struck me in the source notes is that this didn't start in some towering Wall Street boardroom.
No, not at all.
There was no team of investment bankers dreaming this up. The origin story is intensely local.
Very grassroots.
The year is 1985. The place is Virginia Beach. We have an accountant named Ronald Smith who is running a local firm called Action Accounting and Taxes.
Okay.
And he simply decides to start offering his clients loans against their upcoming tax refunds. He's advertising this locally, and apparently he was the first and only firm in the entire United States offering this specific service at the time.
It was a true lightning in a bottle moment for local commerce.
Yeah.
He identified a very specific pain point for his clients and engineered a homegrown solution. But the catalyst that took this from a local accounting quirk to a viral financial strategy happened the very next year, in 1986. And it involved a completely different industry. A salesman from a local car dealership, Charlie Falk's Auto, saw what Ronald Smith was doing and had a brilliant, if opportunistic, realization.
I love this part. How did that partnership actually work on the ground?
Picture this. A customer walks into the tax preparer, finds out they're getting a $1,500 refund, but they'd normally have to wait months to see it.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
Exactly. But the car salesman realizes that if the tax preparer can front that customer the refund money instantly, that customer suddenly has cash in hand right then and there.
Oh, wow.
Cash that could be used immediately as a down payment on a new or used car sitting right on the lot.
That is so clever.
So the dealership and the accounting firm essentially teamed up. The customer gets their taxes done, gets the loan, and walks across the street to buy a Ford Taurus.
Just one-stop shopping.
This practice of using tax refunds in conjunction with car financing caught fire. It spread rapidly throughout the Virginia Beach area, and from there, it just swept across the United States.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you don't stay a local secret in finance for long.
Absolutely not.
The big players noticed this local phenomenon and decided to scale it to the moon. By 1988, a man named Jackson Hewitt purchases Mel Jackson's tax service.
A huge turning point.
He takes this exact concept of the refund anticipation loan and builds an entire national franchise around it, which becomes Jackson Hewitt.
Right.
And then, the very next year, the giant of the industry, H&R Block, joins the party. They incorporate this loan product into thousands of their locations.
The scale is just unbelievable.
There's a data point from 1989 stating that H&R Block actually doubled its business at over 4,000 locations purely because they introduced this new refund loan service. Almost overnight, this Virginia Beach idea morphed into a billion-dollar industry.
What's fascinating here is the historical timing. This massive boom in tax loan practices perfectly coincided with a major technological shift at the Internal Revenue Service.
You're talking about electronic filing.
Yes, the introduction of e-file. To understand why this is so crucial, you have to remember the landscape. Taxpayers were mailing in paper returns, which is why the refunds took 2 to 3 months.
And that delay drove the demand.
That massive delay is what created the overwhelming demand for anticipation loans in the first place. But with electronic filing, the IRS began providing tax preparers with something incredibly valuable, a 24-hour confirmation.
So the preparer hits submit on the computer, and in 24 hours, they get a green light from the government.
Oh, it was so much better than just a green light. This is where the plumbing of the financial system gets incredibly cool. The IRS confirmation wasn't just a read-receive.
Okay.
It specifically stated that the submission was free of mathematical errors and, crucially, that the filer had no outstanding tax liens or delinquent federal student loans. Do you realize what that means for a lender?
It sounds like an absolute guarantee.
It was the holy grail. Unsecured consumer loans are usually risky because people default. But for the lender, this 24-hour confirmation effectively meant there was a near certain probability the IRS would pay the refund within a few weeks.
Wow.
Assuming the income wasn't reported fraudulently, it turned a risky short-term loan into a practically risk-free, government-backed certainty overnight.
That is a massive advantage.
The preparer could confidently issue the filer a check for the expected refund amount, knowing the government's money was practically guaranteed to arrive soon to pay off the loan. They were essentially arbitraging the government's processing time with zero risk.
Which brings us to the math, and ultimately, the costs to the taxpayer. Because getting that money instantly wasn't just a polite favor from the tax preparer to help you buy a car.
Definitely not.
I saw something in our notes about an absolutely insane annual percentage rate. How did the math on these loans actually work out for the person sitting across the desk?
It was staggering. It was essentially like paying a massive premium just to skip a line. We can look at a 1995 report from the New York Times that lays out the typical fee structure beautifully.
Let's hear it.
A standard tax filer using a service like Beneficial might pay a $30 electronic filing fee plus an additional $59 loan fee.
So about $90 total.
Exactly. Now, if you were getting a $1,000 refund, those fees might just seem like a minor acceptable annoyance to get your money today rather than next month.
Right, it just feels like a service charge.
But you have to calculate the annual percentage rate, the APR, on a loan that only lasts 2 to 3 weeks. When you run that math, those flat fees translate to a massive 250% APR.
A 250% APR on a loan that is basically risk-free for the lender. Did that scale hold up as the industry got bigger?
The numbers only grew as the industry matured. By 2004, the average fee just for the bank product side of the transaction, not even the tax prep, was $32, and an astounding 12 million taxpayers were utilizing refund anticipation loans in that single year.
12 million people.
Yes. We also have data from a robust 2006 study by the National Consumer Law Center and the Consumer Federation of America. They found that a consumer could expect to pay about $100 in total to get a RAL for an average refund of about $2,150 from a commercial tax preparation chain.
If you are listening to this, you really have to ask yourself, why would anyone willingly accept those terms?
It is a steep price.
Why surrender $100 or face a 250% APR just to get your own money a few weeks earlier? It seems totally counterintuitive.
It does until you look at the profound underlying demand for immediate cash liquidity. For many American households, that tax refund is the single largest lump sum of cash they will see all year.
That makes sense.
We are talking about families who have immediate pressing needs right in the middle of winter. Past due heating bills, necessary car repairs to get to work, or high-interest credit card debt that is compounding daily. The instant cash isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline.
So people are just desperate.
However, that intense demand also led to massive friction in the system. As early as the 1990s, some filers realized they could exploit the setup.
Oh boy.
They began deliberately misreporting their income to artificially inflate their anticipated refund. They'd grab the instant cash from the loan and then disappear, leaving the banks holding the bag when the IRS eventually processed the return and caught the fraud.
So the risk-free loan suddenly had a massive vulnerability. Did the IRS step in?
They did. This fraud became such an issue that in 1994, the IRS actually stopped providing tax preparers with that crucial deposit confirmation. They just turned it off.
Wow.
They started sending refunds directly to taxpayers instead of to the banks that made the loans. The IRS was actively trying to discourage the practice because they saw it as an uneconomical offer for filers and a headache for the agency.
Did that kill the industry?
Interestingly enough, the halt caused such an uproar in the industry that the IRS reinstated the confirmations the very next year.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the massive controversy that surrounded these products. Now, a quick note for you listening. We're about to explore a major political and social flashpoint. We are strictly looking at this from both sides impartially.
Yes, we're just reporting the data from the sources.
We aren't endorsing any viewpoints here, just unpacking the arguments. Consumer advocates were looking at the raw math and screaming predatory, while the tax prep industry argued they were simply providing a highly requested service to willing adults. Let's look at the actual data behind both arguments because the conflict was intense.
Synthesizing the arguments from critics, particularly groups like the National Consumer Law Center, the core issue was that RALs were viewed as high-profit, low-risk loans that were aggressively and specifically marketed toward the working poor.
Okay.
The opponents argued that the sheer profit motive of the lenders resulted in these loans being pushed on low-income individuals far too often in neighborhoods that were already financially vulnerable.
And what was their main piece of evidence?
Critics claimed that many borrowers were intentionally led to believe the wait for a standard IRS refund was much longer than it actually was, creating artificial urgency. Furthermore, they argued that consumers often didn't even realize they were taking out a loan at all.
How is that possible?
The marketing heavily leaned on phrases like instant refund. So a customer thought they were just paying a processing fee, completely misunderstanding the triple-digit APRs they were actually being charged. The argument was that these consumers were sold on instant gratification at a steep, often obscured cost.
Wait, with interest rates that high, didn't regulators step in? I saw him mentioned in the notes of a lawsuit back in the 80s against Ronald Smith, our pioneer from Virginia Beach.
They absolutely did. State regulators were eyeing the math on these products from the very beginning. In 1988, Ronald Smith and another individual were jointly sued by the Attorney General of Virginia in a Richmond state court for usury.
Usury meaning charging illegally high interest rates.
Basically, yeah, outrageously high interest rates. Now, it is important to note that Ronald Smith was eventually dismissed from the case, with the state's attorney reporting he was not culpable. But it set the tone.
But the interest rates weren't the only thing getting them in hot water, right? There was another mechanism buried in the fine print that caused even more trouble.
Yes, and this is where the mechanics get incredibly murky for the average person filing their taxes. It was a deeply hidden mechanism within these loans known as third-party cross-collection. Or what tax prep firms often vaguely referred to in their paperwork as previous debt. This was essentially a trap for the unwary consumer.
Walk us through how that cross-collection trap actually played out in the real world.
Let's run a scenario. You walk into a tax office today and apply for a refund anticipation loan. You are directing the IRS to send your upcoming refund directly to the bank that is issuing you the loan. Let's call them Bank B. Now, suppose that 4 years ago, you took out a similar loan through a completely different institution, Bank A, and for whatever reason, life happened, and you defaulted on it. You owe Bank A money.
Okay, so there's an old debt out there.
Right. When you sit down today to get your new loan from Bank B, buried in the terms and conditions are cross-collection rules. These rules authorize Bank B to secretly seize your incoming IRS refund, completely deny your new loan application, and transmit your refund money directly to Bank A to settle that old debt.
And let me guess, they still charge you a fee for the privilege of denying you.
You guessed it, they would still hit you with an application fee. As the National Taxpayer Advocate described it in a scathing 2006 report, the banks used this occasion to collect debt owed to other banks. And the major controversy was that this practice was rarely, if ever, disclosed clearly to the person sitting across the desk.
That feels incredibly deceptive.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this exact practice led to massive legal action. In February 2006, the California Attorney General filed a major lawsuit against H&R Block. The state alleged that the company was illegally marketing and selling high-cost loans, and specifically that they were not adequately informing customers about these alleged previous debts.
So they were hiding the trap.
The lawsuit claimed that when customers signed the new RAL application, they were unwittingly agreeing to automatic debt collection from completely different tax preparers or banks. The customer would expect to walk out with cash to pay their heating bill, but instead their application would be denied, their anticipated refund seized to pay off a 4-year-old debt they might have forgotten about, and they would leave the office poorer than when they walked in because of the fees.
So what does this all mean? We have an industry handling 12 million taxpayers a year, generating massive, seemingly unstoppable profits, and deeply embedded in the American tax season ritual. How does the financial juggernaut with that much momentum suddenly face total collapse?
The fatal blow wasn't actually a class action lawsuit or a sweeping new piece of consumer protection legislation from Congress. It was a single, devastating administrative change dealt directly by the Internal Revenue Service.
Really, just an administrative change.
On August 5, 2010, the IRS made a quiet but monumental announcement. They declared that for the upcoming 2011 tax filing season, the agency would no longer provide preparers and financial institutions with the debt indicator.
Debt indicator. That sounds incredibly clinical, but based on what we've discussed, this was the absolute linchpin of the whole system, wasn't it?
Precisely. Remember earlier when I was geeking out about that 24-hour confirmation the IRS sent back in the 80s and 90s?
Yes, the holy grail for lenders.
The debt indicator was the modern evolution of that. It was a simple one-letter code sent from the IRS to the tax preparer's computer. But that single letter contained a universe of data.
What kind of data?
It told the lender everything they needed to know about the taxpayer's risk profile. It disclosed whether the taxpayer owed back taxes or whether they owed other federally collected obligations, like unpaid child support or defaulted federal student loans.
So it was a cheat code for risk assessment.
If the debt indicator came back clear, the bank knew the government wasn't going to intercept the refund. They could issue the loan knowing the money was safe. But when the IRS announced they were turning off the debt indicator, the banks were suddenly flying entirely blind.
Because they have no way of knowing if the IRS is going to actually keep the money.
Exactly. They had no way of knowing if the $2,000 refund they were about to loan money against was actually going to be intercepted by the Treasury Department to pay off the borrower's back child support. Without that one-letter code acting as a shield, the risk profile of these loans skyrocketed to completely unacceptable levels for retail banks.
It's amazing how one administrative switch could dismantle a billion-dollar industry. But looking at the timeline, we also can't ignore the technological evolution that was happening at the exact same time. The technology that originally fueled the boom eventually evolved to make the loans completely obsolete.
That's a great point. Electronic filing became ubiquitous.
Right. By 2017, the data shows that 70% of U.S. taxpayers had access to free e-file and tax preparation services. And more importantly, the speed of the government finally caught up to consumer expectations.
The waiting period shrank dramatically.
If you e-filed your taxes and chose direct deposit, your actual real tax refund would arrive in your bank account in just 10 to 21 days anyway. Plus, taxpayers gained the ability to just go to the IRS website and click, "Where's my refund?" to track their money themselves. That deep desperation of not knowing when a paper check might arrive in the mail, which drove the entire industry in 1985, was entirely eliminated by modern technology.
It was a pincer movement of forces that the industry just couldn't survive. On one side, the banks couldn't price the risk without the IRS debt indicator. On the other side, consumers were increasingly unwilling to pay $100 in steep fees just to save a mere 10-day wait for a direct deposit.
It just didn't make financial sense anymore.
The result was rapid and decisive. By the beginning of the 2013 tax season, major U.S. banks officially threw in the towel. They completely stopped offering refund anticipation loans.
End of an era.
But they replaced them. Instead, the industry shifted to a different product called a refund anticipation check, or RAC. Now, it's vital to note that a RAC is not a loan. It is simply a temporary empty bank account set up by the tax preparer solely to receive the client's IRS refund when it finally arrives from the government.
So what's the point of it?
Its primary purpose today is to provide a mechanism for the client to pay the tax preparer's fee out of the refund itself, rather than having to pay out of pocket at the desk when they file.
It is quite a journey. We started with a local accountant and an opportunistic car salesman in Virginia Beach back in 1986, inventing a clever way to front people cash for down payments on Ford Tauruses.
A very American origin story.
That hyperlocal trick snowballed into a deeply controversial, multi-billion-dollar financial mechanism utilized by 12 million Americans a year. And ultimately, it couldn't survive the combined forces of a single IRS policy change removing a one-letter code and the sheer efficiency of modern e-filing and direct deposit technology.
This raises an important question, though, because the story doesn't entirely end there.
What do you mean?
The data explicitly points out that even today, these newer refund anticipation checks and a whole hodgepodge of similar modern tax time financial products still carry similar flat fees to the old loans. Even more concerning, they carry the exact same risk of third-party cross-collection.
So the trap is still there.
If you use a RAC today just to pay your prep fee out of your refund, your money can still be secretly seized to pay an old bank debt before you ever see a dime, which leaves us with a profound thought to mull over. If millions of consumers today are still perfectly willing to open temporary bank accounts, pay high fees, and risk hidden debt collection just to avoid paying a couple $100s in tax prep fees out of pocket, did the death of the refund anticipation loan actually solve the underlying problem? Or does it simply reveal a much deeper, persistent fragility in everyday consumer finances, where for so many people, tax season remains the only time of the year they ever see a lump sum of their own money?
That is a heavy and fascinating thought to leave on, and it completely reframes how we look at tax season. I want to thank you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive today. If there's one practical takeaway from the rise and fall of the RAL, it's that you should always keep questioning the fine print on any financial product you encounter in the real world, especially when someone is offering you your own money just a little bit faster. See you next time.